All right, thought I'd make a video. I've always thought about relating the stories when I've encountered bear. I mean, up close, direct encounters with bear. And there's three so far in my life. Three times I have, had direct encounters with black bear in New York State. Twice, once in Canada. And I just thought I would, for whatever. All three times were when I was, with the Army training. And so the first time was in Gagetown, Canada. All right, there's where Gagetown, Canada is, the red marker between Maine and Nova Scotia on the map. And I was in the U.S. Army up there training with the Canadians, actually, in Gagetown. And I got to say, I called this major up in Canada, and I was up in upstate New York at the time, and it was my idea between the two of us to have a joint training exercise between his Canadian company and my U.S. infantry company, and they came and trained with us in the Adirondacks Mountains in northern New York 1 year, and the next year we went bust all the way from where we were at to Gagetown, Canada, and we were training there. So it was kind of cool that that man and myself put all this together and made it happen, like a joint training exercise, Canadian-American. So that's what I was doing up there. And for whatever, I remember they were all French-speaking. They spoke French up there, so... My platoon we were just kicking back, we weren't tactical. We were pretty much just out in the field doing whatever you want to do, camp, like a camp out for the night. Usually, we're tactical and there's no lights and no talking like I'm talking now. Everything's hush-hush like you're in enemy territory. But we're done training for the day and we were admin mode. That means you could talk, do whatever you want. Get some sleep, get up early in the morning and go back to work training. So we're all kind of kicked back. People are building their little shelters, their hooches. We were infantry, so we didn't have tents or anything. You'd put together with your poncho a little hooch, we'd call it, to keep the rain and wind off you. People were kind of kicked back. It was almost dark out, and something came over the radio. We had a radio man in our company, and it said, be advised that there were bear in our area, seen in the area that we were in. And so the RTO, the radio telegraph operator, the radio man, RTO, he let it known that they just came over, that they'd seen bear in our area. And I said, I'm not worried about any bear. I'm not worried at all about any bear. And I was saying that kind of just joking around, but I wasn't worried. I didn't think they would come anywhere near us, being that we're about 75 guys there out in the woods, and so I had to relieve myself, that is to take a leak, so to speak. So I wandered off out of the area a little ways where everybody was bivouacking so I could relieve myself. And so I'm standing there, doing my business, standing there, and it was getting pretty dark. And I noticed in front of me, about from me to the camera, maybe closer, was a bear. And I looked at it, and I saw it was a bear standing on its hind legs, it looked like. It looked like a giant teddy bear to me. But I said, oh my God, it's the first time I ever encountered a bear that close. And it was about from me to the camera, and it's just staring at me wide-eyed, and I'm looking at it wide-eyed. And I turned around, and I ran back into the area where the guys were at, and they saw me running in, and everybody's looking at me like, what's going on with Sergeant Shank? And I'm yelling, there's a bear, there's a bear. And people are just looking at me as I ran through the area pretty fast, and they're looking at me wondering what's up, and then the bear was right behind me. I'm laughing about it because it just I ran and it just ran off. It just kept going, but it ran straight through our bivouac area. And you should have seen everybody scatter like I did, but it just kept going. It didn't go after any of us. It just kept running straight through our areas. So that was the first encounter. The second and the third encounter happened at Fort Drum, New York. And the second encounter, we were bivouacking. I was in tanks this time. And we were bivouacking, which is to say, we weren't being tactical. We were out in the woods, in the field, far out in the field. And the tanks were parked, shut down. And at that point, we're all kind of, our group, you're just sleeping outdoors. You can build a little shelter, set up a tent. And I had a little, like I did in Gagetown, I set up a little shelter just with my poncho, with just to keep the rain off me and my gear. It wasn't raining, but it wasn't a tent either. It's just a poncho sheet tied up with some cords, to keep it tight. I'd made a little shelter out of it, or we called it a hooch. But the first time in my 20 years in the field, they had a hot shower point set up out there in the woods, which in 20 years, that's the only time I ever saw that luxury. So it was nighttime, and I was going to go to the hot shower point, and they had like a center block building with some shower stalls in it, and that was kind of nice, and it was kind of lit up, totally admin. And there were trails, I was in a field, a vast field, but to get to this hot water point, you had to walk a little bit through the woods a little bit, and you could see it because it was lit up, and there was a generator going. And so it wasn't hard to get to it, but I kind of had to walk through some scrub trees, and there it was. So I'm walking through that, and it's really dark. And I don't want to sound racist, because this is about a black guy I encountered. It's part of the story. I didn't know this guy. I'm grateful to him, though, but I don't want to sound racist, but I'm going to tell it like it is, because I thought it was kind of funny at the time. So I'm walking through this one area right before I get to the shower point, and somebody in front of me says, "Who's that? Who that?" And I stopped. I couldn't see anybody, and then I saw the whites of his eyes, and I said, "It's Sarge Shank." He says, "Sarge." This is how he says it. "Sarge." And I could see his teeth in his eyes, and he's in front of me. He says, "Sarge, be careful out here." He says, "There's bear around here." I said, "Bear?" He says, "Yeah, Sarge, be careful. There are bears around here. Be careful, Sarge, be real careful." Which I'm grateful for his concern. And I said, "Oh, all right." I wasn't worried about it. So I said, "Thanks for letting me know." And he says, "Be careful, Sarge, be real careful." I remember that. And so I walked on a little, and, probably said, "Have a good night," or "Thanks a lot," or something. I don't know what I said. So I continued on. And next set of white eyes I saw at me, just like in Gagetown. All right, I've got to correct myself. They don't have white eyes. But the first thing I noticed and saw was the bear's eyes both times. Not the whites of their eyes. But that's the first thing I noticed was their eyes, because they're pretty much sitting up like this, eye level with me, right in front of me. And then I noticed their silhouette. Then, you see it's a bear. But the first thing I always noticed was the eyes. Don't ask me why, but they definitely weren't white. So I stand corrected on that little note. I didn't see the bear at first because it's a black bear and it's dark out. They're pretty camouflaged. But I saw its eyes, and this one was bigger. The one in Gagetown was standing on its hind legs. It was about a little bit shorter than me. It's a pretty big bear. I don't know. I would say it was, I don't know how big black bear get, but this one was bigger. Full size. The one in Gagetown looked about 3/4 as big as the one that I encountered. I think it was maybe a minute after I walked past that black guy. He was another sergeant. and who told me to be careful, which I'm grateful for. But the whole thing was kind of funny at that point for me. And then I saw that this bear was actually standing at least as tall as me, and again it was on its haunches, like this, and it was right in front of me, about as far from me to the camera, and it wasn't moving, it wasn't growling. Neither was the one in Gagetown when I initially encountered them. They were just standing there looking at me, and I looked at it, and it stared back at me, and all I can tell you is I just turned and went another way into the darkness, and then took a long way around because I could see where the shower point was because it was lit up, and that's the end of that. But I came right up face to face with this bear, and it was a bigger one. Now the third time and the last time so far was a little more dramatic. And it happened a couple nights after this in the same area. And there were bear around that area. We knew it. And the bear were getting into they're like scavengers. They're not, if it was a brown bear or a grizzly, I'd probably have been dead, been dinner. But black bear, they eat berries and they're scavengers, They're not known to really attack people unless they got their cubs. Then they will fight. I'm pretty sure, they could probably kill somebody if they wanted to. Pretty sure they're more than a match one-on-one. But generally they avoid people, and they'll get into your garbage or scavenge around, eat berries. They'll eat whatever. They're like a giant raccoon in that sense. So I wasn't really afraid of them. The third time I was sleeping in my little hooch, laying on my back. It was summertime. I wasn't zipped up in a sleeping bag. I was probably laying on top of it, but my legs were free. That comes into this. And I just had a real thin nylon poncho that I'd strung up over top of me, to keep, if it should start raining, to keep the rain off myself and my gear and weapon. And our tanks were parked somewhere, and I didn't have any ammo or anything like that. I was training. But a bear walked, I don't know what it was doing. Maybe it was trying to get into my rucksack. I don't know. But I woke up in the middle of the night, laying on my back, and there's a bear on top of me, really, like walking over my poncho, collapsing it on top of me. And I just instinctively kicked real hard, twice, kicked as hard as I could. I kicked this thing in the stomach, probably like 2 or 3 times. And it got off of me, and I looked and I saw a bear running off. I kicked the bear in the stomach, lived to talk about it. So I guess I was pretty lucky. So not much of a story there, but I've encountered a bear 3 times, and the third time I can honestly say I kicked a black bear in the stomach 2 or 3 times, and it ran off, fortunately. So not much of a story there. My 3 encounters with black bear. Fortunately, again, they were black bear, which I think could be quite deadly if they wanted to, but they don't see people as dinner. I don't think they do, to my knowledge. But if you threaten them or their cubs, I'm pretty sure they could be pretty fierce, probably deadly. Oh, I think I looked it up. The last time somebody in New York State was killed by a bear was like 1910, about 100 years, more than 100 years ago. I don't know the circumstances. That may have changed, but I looked this up a few years ago. So that's it, my bear story, and I just put it out there just because I wanted to. It's kind of like my memoirs channel at this point. I'm still just kind of getting by. It's been a little over a week since my brother died, and you know how that is. It just sets in at different levels, and just getting by, working. So take care, and God bless. Correction. Actually, very tragically, the last time someone was killed by a black bear in New York State was in 2002. A 5 month old infant was killed in the Catskill Mountains. The baby was in a stroller near the porch of a vacation home when a black bear attacked. The bear knocked the stroller over, took the infant in its mouth, and carried the child into the woods. The infant died from neck and head injuries. It goes on to say this remains the only documented fatal black bear attack on a human in New York State history. But I read another one where somebody was killed like around 1910 or 1920. A woman was up in the mountains. But it's very rare that they'll do that. And they usually they don't see you as a meal. Um, so I guess I went on and read getting to be more common with people encroaching on their territory. But I wanted to clear that up. That's sad. You know, I googled it. I do correct myself on these. Yeah, that's quite sad. Hmm.